4 armed robbers entered a bank in Argentina and held hostages. The police surrounded the place, and after several hours of negotiation, the robbers announced that they would surrender on the condition that the police bring them pizza. The pizza arrived, but the robbers suddenly cut off all communication channels with the police. The police decided to storm the bank, but inside, there was no one except the hostages. When they went downstairs, they found the bank vault looted, with no trace of the robbers or any evidence of their escape route, no hole in the ground or any possible exit. The police immediately turned their attention to the hostages, suspecting that the robbers were hiding among them. So, did the robbers really hide among the hostages, as we know in today's story? In the year 2006, the largest bank robbery in Argentina was executed, a smart and incredibly complex operation. The robbers behind this operation were 4 individuals. The leader and mastermind of the operation was Fernando Araujo. The second was the engineer of the operation, Sebastian Polyester. The third was Beto Della Torre, known as the financier. The fourth was Luis Lance, known as the violent one. Additionally, 2 other individuals assisted them, but their identities remained undisclosed. The first referred to as the doctor, and the second as the boy. Remember, the story begins with Fernando, the leader, and the mastermind of the operation. This man entered a psychiatrist's office one day and said, "I want to rob a bank." The psychiatrist was surprised and thought he was speaking under the influence of drugs, as Fernando was known to smoke and use marijuana. The psychiatrist asked, "All right, so why do you want money? Do you need it?" Fernando replied, "No, I don't need money. But you know me. I am an artistic person, and I feel that I can create a great artistic work in the field of bank robberies." The psychiatrist didn't give much consideration to his words, thinking it was the marijuana speaking. However, Fernando was indeed planning to rob a bank and execute the largest bank robbery in the history of Argentina. During this period, Fernando would go out daily and stroll through the streets of the Argentine capital, Buenos Aires, to explore potential targets for the operation. He eventually identified a bank called Banco Rio, one of the well-known banks in a very affluent area. This bank was where the wealthy kept their assets, money, and valuable belongings. Afterward, Fernando contemplated the ways to carry out the operation. The first method was to enter the bank while it was open, brandish their weapons, take the money from the tellers, and quickly exit before the police surrounded the place. However, this method had a high risk, and the loot would be minimal because they wouldn't have time to access the vault and loot its contents before the police arrived. The second method was to break into the bank when it was closed, typically requiring digging a tunnel under the ground to reach the vault. However, this method had its challenges, as the bank had thermal sensors and advanced alarm systems that could quickly detect if someone entered the closed vault. Therefore, the approach was difficult and carried a high risk. Fernando thought that if he was going to take risks in any case, he must at least get the biggest loot. This meant that he would execute the second method, digging a tunnel and entering the vault while the bank was closed. He began to contemplate how he could dig the tunnel. Initially, they thought of renting a ground-floor apartment or warehouse near the bank and digging a tunnel to reach the vault from underground. However, Fernando stumbled upon a pleasant surprise. It would simplify all this work for him. One day, while conducting his reconnaissance rounds, he noticed the sewer openings along the street in front of the bank, approximately every 10 meters. There was a sewer opening, indicating the presence of an underground tunnel passing in front of the bank. Fernando continued to trace it. The openings were quiet along the street until he reached the sewer outlet. This outlet was a large opening located only about 150 meters from the bank. It meant that there was an existing tunnel, so Fernando entered this sewer tunnel and began to explore. Initially, the tunnel was square, but after walking about 100 meters, it turned circular with a diameter of about 6 meters, a massive tunnel extending beneath the city and passing directly in front of the bank. Now, Fernando needed someone to help him because it was impossible to execute this operation alone. The first person who came to his mind was one of his friends named Sebastian Polyester, known as the engineer. This man was an expert in electronics and mechanical sciences. When Fernando presented the idea to Sebastian, he was surprised because, to his knowledge, Fernando had no criminal history or experience in thefts. All he knew about him was that he loved art and marijuana. However, Fernando started to share the details of the idea and how they could reach the vault through the sewer tunnel underground. Sebastian, in turn, began to seriously consider the matter, even though he himself had never stolen anything in his life. He pondered entering this field, but his family's past with banks was tragic. His father and grandfather suffered severe losses when the banking system collapsed at one point in Argentina. Much of their savings and money were lost, and they never recovered their rightful dues. Sebastian began to view this as a matter of reclaiming what was rightfully theirs. The banks were the villain in the equation. If he stole from the bank, it wouldn't be immoral from his perspective, at least. So, Engineer Sebastian decided to join the operation. With all these calculations, they still didn't have precise numbers. To obtain accurate numbers, they needed building plans for the bank, likely available at the municipal office. They felt they needed assistance from people experienced in the world of theft. And above all, they needed financial support because the tools that Sebastian, the engineer, would manufacture required funds. Fernando, the leader, started looking for a new partner to join them. He contacted an individual referred to as the Doctor, a person whose identity was never revealed, playing the role of a coordinator. The Doctor told Fernando that he would connect him with the right people to assist them in the operation. The first person was Beto de la Torre, nicknamed the Financier. He was a person with a criminal background, though not directly involved in theft operations. However, he had experience in the world of weapons. Fernando, the leader, and the Doctor met with the Financier to explain the idea, and upon hearing the details, Beto expressed enthusiasm to join them. When Fernando asked if he had the capability to fund the operation, they needed various items. Beto honestly replied that he didn't have cash but owned a truck that he could sell, and with its proceeds, he could contribute to the operation. Thus, he became the main third member of the gang. The Doctor, as we mentioned, remained an unknown figure and was not considered a primary member since he played the role of a coordinator and did not actively participate in the operation. Fernando, the leader, still wanted a fourth person, a laborer who could handle the manual work that required strength, as Sebastian, the engineer, would be occupied with manufacturing tools. Additionally, Sebastian had personal and family issues. The team's preparations were almost complete, and now they needed to address the issue of thermal sensors and alarm systems that would trigger as soon as they breached the vault. Fernando, the leader, being from an artistic background, began conceptualizing a suit that would conceal its heat from the sensors. He decided to use a suit made from mountain climbers' sleeping bags and purchased a thermal camera to test its effectiveness. However, the idea of the suit was somewhat frightening. There was still a possibility of failure, especially considering they had to move inside the vault with various tools and items that could be detected by sensors. The overall idea seemed unsafe, and there were significant risks involved. Fernando, the leader, was discouraged by this, always contemplating alternative ways for them to enter the vault. Suddenly, one day, a crazy idea crossed his mind. Throughout the planning, he had been focused on the idea of robbing the bank while it was closed, infiltrating the vault from underneath without anyone seeing them. He dismissed the idea of using weapons to enter the bank, fearing a rapid police response. The new idea that struck him was to combine the tunneling method with an armed infiltration. The plan was to use the tunnel to enter, but employ weapons for the escape. This way, the police would surround the bank, but they wouldn't have any idea that the thieves were escaping underground. When Fernando shared this idea with the rest of the group, they were astonished and enthusiastic. Now they needed to add weapons to the equipment they required. The financier assured them that he would take care of the weapons since he had experience in the criminal world. However, he warned them to be cautious because the weapons they would use had a unique feature that would be revealed at the end of the story. The entire process took about a year. During this time, they completed the tunnel and built a small dam inside the sewer tunnel. The purpose of this dam was to raise the water level to a certain point, as they planned to use small rubber boats inside the tunnel. They knew that when they emerged with their loot, they wouldn't be able to carry it on foot, and half their bodies would be submerged in water. The water in the sewer would move very slowly, so they needed boats. They constructed this dam to allow the boats to move comfortably. Afterward, they discussed the escape route. The initial idea was to escape towards the sewer outlet, but they reconsidered. There was a high probability that the police would head straight to the outlet and possibly cut off their route. They started studying the alternative route, which was in the opposite direction of the outlet. They discovered that this direction was much better because it had hundreds of exits openings along the tunnel. These openings were sewer manholes, placed every 10 meters along the tunnel. After studying this opposite direction, they selected a specific opening, approximately 200 meters away from the bank's location. They decided they would bring a van and stop it directly over this sewer opening. On the van's floor, they would cut a hole, and this hole would be directly above the sewer opening. In other words, they would emerge from the sewers directly into the van without anyone seeing them. And indeed, the financier brought a small van and placed it in the garage of his house. The gang gathered in the garage to modify the van and cut an opening in its floor, pretending to be working on it. At that moment, the wife of Beto, the financier, entered. She was Alicia Del Toro, Beto's wife, and this time, they allowed her to be present because she would play an important role in the story later on. This was the first and only time the gang members met. Alicia Del Toro, Beto's wife, asked them about what they were doing in the garage, and they all assured Beto that it was nothing to worry about. The situation was fine, but this meeting was significant because Alicia Del Toro would play a crucial role in the story later on. After the gang finished modifying the van, they needed a driver. This is where the second unknown person, called the Kid, came into play. The Kid, like the doctor, was responsible for driving the car and waiting for them inside until they finished the operation. Now, almost all aspects were ready. The only thing remaining was finding a quick way to open the safety deposit boxes inside the vault because there were hundreds of them, and manual opening would take too long. Sebastian, the engineer, crafted a hydraulic tool they named the cannon. Its function was to break the locks of the safety deposit boxes in just 7 seconds each, making it a crucial tool for the operation. Finally, after all the preparations and efforts, everything was ready. As you can see in this sewer tunnel they entered with boats, the tunnel they dug leading to the bank above, and the bank's vault containing the safety deposit boxes on the lower floor of the building, approximately 200 meters away. This is the sewer opening they would emerge from, with the van above it, ready for their escape. The gang decided to execute the operation on January 13, 2006. Sebastian, the engineer, was the only one who entered through the sewer tunnel, and next to the tunnel opening he had dug, small rubber boats were present with the necessary tools, including the cannon. After that, Sebastian climbed through the excavated tunnel until he reached the wall of the bank, where the vault was situated. He waited there until his colleagues signaled him. Fernando, the leader, Beto, the financier, and Luis, the violent one, met in front of the bank's door. Once they were sure everything was ready and everyone was in their position, they stormed into the bank with their weapons, taking the customers and employees inside the bank as hostages, ordering them to place their faces on the ground. The bank guard in the surveillance room locked himself in and immediately informed the police. It only took a few minutes for police patrols near the bank to arrive. Here, Fernando began enacting a theatrical plan he had previously named the Coca Plan. The idea was for one of the hostages to exit the bank's door, pretending to escape, but quickly returning after seeing the police surrounding the place. The goal was to deceive the police into thinking they were planning to escape before they arrived. They even placed a fake getaway car in front of the bank, but due to the rapid police response, their plan failed, and now they were trapped inside the bank. The Coca plan worked. When the leader of the police operation arrived, they informed the police present that the thieves had attempted to escape but returned. Fernando communicated with Sebastian, the engineer, who was waiting outside in the tunnel, and Fernando told him to breach the wall. Sebastian started digging from the outside, and after hearing some movement, Fernando was relieved as it confirmed that the tunnel was connected to the bank. He was afraid they might have dug in the wrong place. Sebastian, the engineer, entered the vault with the cannon and began using it to open the numerous safety deposit boxes rapidly. The plan was to spend a specific time opening the boxes. They had allocated 2 hours during which they aimed to open as many boxes as possible, estimating around 400 boxes. Sebastian, the engineer, and Fernando, the leader, stayed inside the vault executing the heist, while above, Luis, the violent one, and Beto, the financier, controlled the hostages, trying to stall the police until the 2 hours passed. Luis was the one holding the phone, and this man, as I mentioned before, had a talent for acting and deception, managing to engage with the police calmly. When the police called him, they were surprised at how composed he was, as if nothing unusual was happening. The operations leader asked, "What are your demands? What do you want?" Louis, the violent one, replied honestly, saying, "Look, we entered to rob the bank and we're planning to escape quickly, but you guys arrived faster than we expected. We don't want to harm anyone, but right now, we don't know what to do." The operations leader was observing Louis the violent one through the bank's window, talking on the phone, and he was puzzled by how calm the man was, sitting in a chair with one leg over the other, seemingly unconcerned. At that moment, the police realized that the man in front of him was experienced and had a criminal record. Indeed, he interrupted his thoughts and said, "Listen, my friend, I'm coming out of Shika prison after spending 15 years there. This is my first robbery since I got out, so I know their procedures very well. I advise you not to try anything funny, as it could lead to something bad for the hostages." The leader replied, all right, don't worry. We won't do anything or play any tricks, but you release one hostage periodically to show us your goodwill." Lois responded, "We release the guard. Why are you being greedy for more? We decide when to release the hostages, not you. Fine, goodbye," and he hung up. In this way, Louis demonstrated to the operation leader that he was in control. He made him think twice before attempting anything reckless. That's all the thieves needed. Time. One amusing thing that happened was that Louis, the violent one, and Peto, the financier, discovered that an elderly woman among the hostages was celebrating her birthday that day. They went to the small kitchen annexed to the bank, prepared a small cake for her, and sang "Happy Birthday" while all the hostages lay on the floor. In the end, they told her that their birthday gift to her was releasing her, and indeed, they escorted her out and let her go. This story has been mentioned in several sources, but its peculiarity makes it hard to believe. Regardless, the communication continued between Louis and the operation leader. Louis kept coming up with new stories or tactics to engage them each time until he told them to contact lawyer Mari for negotiation. He provided them with a phone number supposedly belonging to one of the hostages, claiming it was the lawyer's. When the police called the number, Louis himself answered, disguised his voice, posed as the lawyer, and engaged in negotiation, wasting another 2 hours of their limited time. Unfortunately, Engineer Sebastian and Commander Fernando couldn't open the targeted safe deposit box. They only managed to open 147 boxes. The hydraulic tool, accompanied by the cannon, had issues, and its rising temperature made it challenging to operate efficiently. However, the loot they acquired was substantial, enough to satisfy them and more. They decided not to risk further and stick to the time they set for themselves, realizing that greed could blind their judgment. Commander Fernando called Louis and informed them that they were starting the escape plan from the bank. Here, Louis would use his final trick against the police. He called the operation leader and said, "Look, we've decided to surrender, but we know we'll stay in custody without a decent meal for a long time. Before surrendering, we want pizza, a large quantity for us and the hostages. Get us enough, and it should be authentic Italian pizza from a specific restaurant." The designated restaurant was far from the bank to delay the police as much as possible. The operation leader agreed, saying they would get it after the conversation. Louis cut all communication with the police, and while the hostages remained lying down as ordered, he threatened them that any movement would result in gunfire. Meanwhile, Fernando and Sebastian, who were in the vault, collected all the loot in bags and threw them through the tunnel Louis had dug. They joined the others in the vault, quickly laid a small mattress on the floor, placed their weapons on it, and we will soon understand why they did that. Afterward, they descended to the small rubber boats waiting for them below, loaded the bags onto one of the boats, and boarded the other. The boats were connected by a rope, and they moved through the sewer tunnel until they reached the exit. They took the loot bags with them and climbed the ladder. Waiting for them above was a van and its driver. They loaded the bags through the opening in the van's floor, and the car just about accommodated them with the large bags they were carrying. They then drove away without anyone seeing them. After reaching the prepared safe house, they unloaded the loot, turned on the TV to watch the news, and celebrated their victory without bothering to count the loot immediately, as the calculations would take a long time. The loot amounted to $16 million, making this operation classified as the largest bank robbery in Argentina's history. After dividing the loot among themselves, the thieves celebrated their success. The loot consisted of a small fortune in cash, gold, and jewelry. The bank estimated the stolen amount to be around $19 million, making it the largest bank robbery in Argentina's history. The plan was for each member to go their separate ways without ever seeing each other again. Each one took their share, got into their cars, and left. The merchants in the area were all jubilant, but one of them quickly became suspicious. He decided to follow the others, and Beethoven, the financier, was the one who got caught. When he returned home, his wife Elisa and their children were eagerly waiting for him. Elisa, who was aware of the operation, eagerly anticipated their new wealth that would change their lives forever. A grand celebration ensued that night with his wife and children. However, as time passed, Beethoven noticed that one of the bags from the loot, which he had stored in a safe in their house, was missing. When he opened the bag, he discovered a large sum had disappeared. Confronting his wife, Elisa admitted to taking 5 or 6 small bags, each containing about $300,000. A quarrel ensued between them, and Beethoven demanded she return the money. Elisa refused, and the argument escalated. Eventually, Beethoven took the remaining loot and hid it elsewhere. He never expected his wife to harbor such resentment that she would immediately report him to the police. After leaving the house, Elisa went to the police and reported the theft. She even suspected him of having an affair, thinking he took the money to visit a secret lover. In reality, Beethoven had no mistress. He loved his family and would never leave them. Many details unfolded after this incident, but they are not crucial to the story. In short, Beethoven was arrested, and despite refusing to reveal his accomplices' identities, the assistance of his wife and other evidence, such as tracking phones, led to identifying all 4 of them. Arrest warrants were issued for all of them. Although each one of them went in different directions, eventually, all of them were captured. Fernando, the leader, was hiding in a remote and isolated tent, but the National Guard patrols managed to apprehend him. Louis, the violent one, even left Argentina and went to Uruguay, his home country. Still, he was captured there as well. Sebastian, the engineer, was the easiest to catch, as he was captured in his own home. All 4 of them were eventually tried. Interestingly, despite the magnitude of the heist, most of the loot was never recovered. The thieves had hidden it in difficult-to-reach places, and they refused to confess or cooperate. In the end, they received relatively light sentences, ranging from 9 to 15 years, and some of them even served shorter terms due to good behavior. The strange aspect of the story is that they all received relatively short sentences, considering the severity of the armed robbery. The main reason for this leniency was the fact that their weapons were fake. When they left the bank, they intentionally left their weapons visible on a bed, making it clear that their firearms were replicas. This strategy aimed to ensure that if caught, they would face lighter sentences for an unarmed robbery, which eventually led to their early release. Despite the legal repercussions, most of the stolen money was never recovered, possibly hidden as bribes. The bank's clients were compensated by the bank and insurance companies. In a dramatic film about the case and a documentary film, they tell their stories without remorse, portraying their lives comfortably. As for the exact fate of the money, it remains uncertain, and with that, we conclude our story.